One of the most dangerous mistakes being made right now is the confusion between short-term success and long-term security. It is easy to celebrate rising stock prices, record quarterly profits, and a surge in consumer spending. But beneath the surface lies a structural weakness that few want to acknowledge. When a nation, a company, or even an individual begins to prioritize immediate gratification over sustained durability, the cost eventually arrives. The history of economies, empires, and corporations is full of lessons where the focus on the present blinded leaders from preparing for the future. America is not exempt from this truth, and what we are witnessing today is a repeated pattern of sacrificing tomorrow for today. The problem begins with the financial system itself. The obsession with quarterly earnings reports has created a culture where CEOs are more concerned about the next 3 months than the next 3 decades. Investors demand instant results, and companies respond by cutting corners, reducing long-term investments, and squeezing every possible margin from the present. Research and development budgets get slashed because they do not deliver immediate profit. And infrastructure upgrades are delayed because shareholders want bigger dividends now. This creates an illusion of strength in the short run, but the real foundation is slowly being eroded. When other nations are investing heavily in high-speed rail, green energy, artificial intelligence, and education, America is applauding stock buybacks that inflate share prices without building anything of lasting value. Government policy mirrors this same short-term thinking. Leaders promise voters immediate relief rather than long-term stability. Taxes are cut to gain popularity, but deficits balloon in silence. Complex challenges like climate change, crumbling infrastructure, and healthcare reform require decades of careful planning, but instead they are treated as inconveniences to be pushed to the next administration. The focus remains on the next election cycle, not the next generation. This mindset is not just politics. It is a systemic flaw that seeps into every level of decision-making. When the future is treated as a distant horizon instead of an approaching reality, disaster becomes inevitable. The consequences are visible in the labor market. Workers today are encouraged to consume endlessly, but the investments in their education, training, and skills are insufficient for the economy of tomorrow. Entire industries are being reshaped by automation and artificial intelligence. Yet, millions are still trained for jobs that will vanish in less than a decade. Instead of preparing people for new opportunities, the focus is on boosting short-term employment numbers to show progress. But the real progress, the one that ensures workers thrive for decades, is being ignored. The economy becomes like a house built on sand. It looks stable today, but the foundation is fragile and unprepared for storm. Short-termism also distorts America's global role. For decades, leadership was built not only on military strength or financial power, but also on the credibility of long-term commitments. Allies relied on stability, on the belief that promises made today would hold tomorrow. Yet, in recent years, foreign policy has increasingly been treated like a transaction. Deals are made, then abandoned. Alliances are questioned, treaties are renegotiated, and partners are left uncertain. This erosion of trust is a symptom of short-term thinking, focusing only on immediate leverage while ignoring the lasting cost of credibility lost. Once trust is broken on the global stage, rebuilding it takes far longer than winning it in the first place. In business, the same story repeats itself with innovation. American companies used to dominate by daring to invest in ideas that had no immediate payoff. Decades ago, billions were spent on space exploration, the internet, and biotechnology, long before they became profitable. These investments created entire industries that shaped the modern world. But today, many companies hesitate to take those risks. Venture capital is more interested in quick exits than patient growth. And many startups are pressured to deliver rapid valuations instead of meaningful innovation. The result is a culture that celebrates unicorns, but forgets that true breakthroughs often require decades of persistence, failures, and long-term vision. Short-term wins also come at a human cost. The pursuit of immediate success often extracts value from workers without reinvesting in their well-being. Employees are overworked, wages stagnate, and benefits shrink, all to maximize quarterly results. This creates a cycle of burnout, disillusionment, and declining productivity over time. The short-term numbers look strong, but the long-term health of the workforce deteriorates. A country that once drew the world's brightest minds with promises of opportunity and prosperity risks becoming a place where talent feels disposable and undervalued. The financial markets themselves reinforce this mistake. Speculation dominates over true investment. High-frequency trading, speculative bubbles, and short-term bets create volatility without creating value. Ordinary people's savings are tied to a system where instant reaction matters more than thoughtful planning. The 2008 financial crisis was one of the clearest examples of what happens when short-term profit is prioritized over long-term stability. And yet, more than a decade later, similar behaviors still persist. Lessons are forgotten because the short-term rewards are too tempting. But history has shown again and again that markets punish such behavior eventually, and the longer the delay, the harsher the correction. This culture of immediacy also influences the mindset of younger generations. Social media rewards instant gratification, influencing not just entertainment, but even the way business leaders and policymakers think. The pursuit of viral moments and quick wins bleeds into professional life, creating leaders who measure success in weeks instead of decades. Patience, resilience, and discipline, the very qualities that build sustainable power, are replaced with a hunger for immediate recognition. But history does not reward the impatient. It rewards those who plant seeds knowing they will take decades to grow. Ultimately, mistaking short-term wins for long-term security is like mistaking the glow of a candle for the light of the sun. A candle burns brightly for a moment, but it fades quickly and leaves darkness behind. A nation that confuses temporary success with enduring strength is setting itself up for decline. The real challenge is not how bright the next quarter looks, but how secure the next century will be. The world we live in today is no longer divided into isolated islands of power. Every economy, every business, every nation is tied together through supply chains, technology, and markets that cross borders without hesitation. Energy flows, financial capital moves, and data streams connect the globe in ways that were unimaginable only a few decades ago. To thrive in this environment, recognizing and embracing interdependence is not optional, it is survival. Yet the critical mistake being made is the illusion that one country, no matter how powerful, can detach itself from this web and still maintain dominance. By ignoring the power of global interdependence, America risks isolating itself at a time when the rest of the world is building stronger connections and deeper partnerships. The clearest evidence of this mistake is in trade. Global supply chains are no longer linear. They are complex ecosystems that rely on parts, components, and labor from dozens of countries. A smartphone assembled in one country contains chips designed in another, rare earth elements mined in another, and software coded across multiple continents. To assume that cutting ties or retreating into isolation will strengthen the economy is to misunderstand how value is created in the modern world. Every act of economic disengagement has ripple effects, not just abroad, but within domestic industries that rely on these networks. When tariffs are imposed or trade barriers erected, the cost does not simply fall on foreign nations. It also weakens domestic manufacturers, retailers, and consumers who depend on the flow of goods and services at competitive prices. Technology highlights this interdependence even more dramatically. The breakthroughs of the 21st century are not the product of a single nation's effort, but the result of collaboration across borders. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, renewable energy, and space exploration involve research teams, funding, and talent that span the globe. By trying to wall off innovation, America risks slowing its own progress. Restricting access, banning partnerships, and limiting academic exchanges create the illusion of security, but in reality weaken the ability to compete. Other nations, instead of being left behind, accelerate their cooperation, pooling resources and knowledge to move faster. The result is not greater independence for America, but greater irrelevance in the race for the future. Interdependence is also about financial systems. Global capital flows operate in real time, responding to confidence, stability, and opportunity. For decades, America was the primary destination for this capital because it offered not only returns but trust. Today, however, the rise of alternative markets from Asia to Africa to the Middle East is reshaping the financial landscape. Nations are building new institutions, creating new payment systems, and diversifying away from dependence on any single currency. The belief that dominance can be preserved while ignoring these shifts is a dangerous illusion. The financial architecture of tomorrow will not be controlled by one center alone, but by a network of interconnected hubs. Failing to recognize this means risking the slow erosion of influence as capital begins to flow more freely elsewhere. Cultural and human connections are another dimension of interdependence. People move across borders in search of opportunity, education, and a better quality of life. The flow of talent has always been a strength for America, drawing the brightest minds from around the globe. But by tightening barriers, restricting visas, and making it harder for skilled workers to contribute, the country weakens its own position. Those same minds find opportunities in Europe, Asia, or the Middle East, where governments are eager to welcome them. Once that talent establishes itself elsewhere, the networks of innovation and entrepreneurship shift along with it. Ignoring this dynamic is to ignore one of the most powerful forces of global progress, the free movement of ideas and people. But interdependence also defines geopolitics. In the past, military strength alone was enough to secure dominance. Today, soft power, alliances, and cooperative agreements often matter more. Nations rely on one another for energy, for trade, for stability in regions where conflicts can quickly spill across borders. By acting as though alliances are optional or temporary, America risks pushing partners into the arms of others who are eager to build stronger ties. This vacuum does not remain empty for long. Other nations step in to forge closer cooperation, building influence and shaping the rules of tomorrow's global order. The idea that unilateral action will ensure long-term strength underestimates how deeply connected the world has already become. The pandemic revealed just how dependent nations are on one another. From medical supplies to vaccines to critical raw materials, no country could manage the crisis entirely on its own. Yet even after such a clear demonstration of interdependence, the temptation to retreat inward has not disappeared. But in times of global crises, climate change, health emergencies, financial shocks, Cooperation is not only beneficial, it is necessary. Ignoring this truth means being unprepared for the very challenges that no single nation can solve alone. When others choose collaboration, the one that chooses isolation falls behind, not because it is weak, but because it refuses to participate in the collective strength of the whole. At the corporate level, multinational businesses have long understood that their success depends on embracing interdependence. Companies that once operated solely within national borders now rely on customers, suppliers, and employees from every part of the globe. Yet even they are vulnerable to policies that undermine this network. When governments push for decoupling or restrict international collaboration, companies are forced to make difficult choices that reduce efficiency, raise costs, and diminish competitiveness. Those who adapt by shifting operations to more open and interconnected regions thrive, while those trapped in isolation struggle to keep pace. This is not simply theory. It is already happening as industries migrate to where cooperation is encouraged rather than hindered. Energy is another domain where interdependence cannot be ignored. Oil, gas, and renewable technologies all flow through international markets that no single country controls. Even nations rich in natural resources rely on others for refining, transportation, and distribution. The push toward renewable energy further increases interdependence because solar panels, wind turbines, and batteries all depend on materials sourced globally. Attempting to secure energy independence without recognizing these dynamics is futile. The real path to stability lies not in withdrawal, but in building resilient partnerships that guarantee access and mutual benefit in times of uncertainty. Ignoring interdependence also has psychological consequences. It fosters the belief that one nation can prosper alone while others struggle. But this is no longer reality. When global markets crash, no economy is untouched. When supply chains break, no business is safe. When climate disasters strike, no border provides protection. The interconnectedness of the modern world means that success or failure is shared. To believe otherwise is to misread the very structure of the world we now live in. Strength is no longer measured by how isolated one can remain, but by how deeply one can connect and still maintain resilience within those connections. The power of interdependence is that it multiplies capacity. One nation's innovation becomes a global product. One breakthrough in medicine saves millions of lives across continents. One new technology reshapes industries in every corner of the world. To ignore this reality is to underestimate the scale of opportunity that comes from collaboration. The real competition of the future will not be between nations that stand alone, but between networks of nations that learn to work together more effectively than their rivals. In such a future, those who cling to isolation are not just weaker, they are irrelevant. The greatest mistake a nation can make is not simply falling behind in technology, but misunderstanding where the next wave of innovation is actually headed. Innovation has never been static. It shifts, evolves, and reinvents itself as society's needs and global challenges change. The problem arises when institutions, governments, and corporations cling to the past, defending industries that once brought prosperity but no longer represent the future. America today is in danger of repeating this error by pouring resources into preserving the old giants of industry instead of cultivating the sectors that will define the next century. It risks losing its position as the leader of global progress. The pattern is familiar. In the 20th century, heavy manufacturing, automobiles, and fossil fuels were the engines of economic growth. They created jobs, built cities, and powered the military might that made the United States the most dominant force in the world. But in the 21st century, the engines of growth are different. Artificial intelligence, renewable energy, biotechnology, quantum computing, and digital finance are the areas carrying tomorrow's economy. These sectors demand long-term investment, visionary leadership, and willingness to embrace transformation. Yet too often, American policy and capital remain fixated on defending industries of the past instead of unleashing the possibilities of the future. Consider energy as the clearest example. The global shift toward renewable power is undeniable. Nations across Europe, Asia, and even Africa are pouring billions into solar, wind, hydrogen, and nuclear fusion research. They see not just environmental necessity, but strategic advantage in controlling the clean energy of tomorrow. Yet America remains deeply entangled in protecting fossil fuel industries that dominate its politics and economy. By clinging to oil and gas, it delays the inevitable transition, while other nations seize the opportunity to lead in green technology. Once these supply chains and technologies are established globally, catching up becomes far harder. The nation that misses the early wave of investment rarely recaptures its leadership once the wave has passed. Technology itself offers another warning. Artificial intelligence is not just a tool. It is the infrastructure upon which industries from healthcare to logistics to defense will be built. Innovation here is not measured in months, but in decades of accumulated research, talent, and computing power. While America continues to produce breakthroughs, the commitment to scale and long-term vision is fragmented. Venture capital often seeks the fastest return, not the deepest transformation. Corporations race to deploy AI for profit today rather than laying the groundwork for the breakthroughs of tomorrow. Meanwhile, countries like China are integrating AI into every level of their national strategy, from education to industry to defense, ensuring that it is not just a product, but a pillar of their entire economic structure. Misreading this trajectory means underestimating how foundational AI will be to the global order. The same applies to biotechnology. The next revolutions in medicine will not come from marginal improvements to existing drugs, but from genetic engineering, synthetic biology, and personalized healthcare systems powered by big data. These technologies will redefine not only how humans treat disease, but also how agriculture, food security, and environmental restoration are managed. Other nations are already investing heavily in these areas, creating ecosystems of universities, laboratories, and private companies that collaborate on a massive scale. In contrast, America risks fragmenting its approach, allowing politics, regulation, and short-term profit motives to hinder progress. Misreading the role of biotechnology means ignoring its potential to become one of the largest industries of the future, shaping health and survival for billions. Digital finance is another frontier, often misunderstood. The global economy is shifting toward decentralized systems, alternative currencies, and digital payment infrastructures that bypass traditional banks. In regions like Africa and Southeast Asia, mobile payment systems are leapfrogging traditional financial structures altogether. The future is not only about Wall Street and centralized control. It is about creating financial access for billions who were excluded before. Yet America remains focused on defending its traditional banking giants and regulatory frameworks, reacting with suspicion to innovations like blockchain instead of leading their integration responsibly. The danger is that by the time acceptance comes, the rest of the world will have already built the systems, set the standards, and captured the opportunities. Infrastructure represents another miscalculation. Innovation is not only about inventing new technologies, but also about building the physical and digital foundations that allow them to scale. High-speed rail, advanced ports, smart cities, and next-generation internet connectivity are being developed at rapid pace in other parts of the world. These projects create environments where innovation thrives because systems are designed to support the technologies of tomorrow. Yet much of America's infrastructure remains outdated, struggling to support even the needs of today. Roads, bridges, power grids, and digital networks suffer from underinvestment. While other nations are building the future, America risks patching the past. This is not just a missed opportunity, but a fundamental misreading of how innovation requires environments designed to nurture it. Education is the silent partner in innovation. And here too, the danger of miscalculation is clear. The industries of the future require talent skilled in data science, engineering, biotechnology, and systems thinking. Yet the education system often lags behind these needs, producing graduates unprepared for the demands of the 21st century. Meanwhile, countries that prioritize STEM education, continuous retraining, and international collaboration are building a workforce ready to dominate future industries. If America continues to underinvest in preparing its people for these changes, no amount of capital will compensate for the absence of human talent equipped to innovate. Misreading the future of innovation also comes from misunderstanding the pace of change. Technologies that once took decades to mature now evolve in years. Waiting for proof before committing resources is no longer a safe strategy. By the time an industry proves itself, the leaders are already entrenched and the window of opportunity has closed. The danger is not only missing out on profit, but losing the ability to shape the rules, standards, and norms of the industries that will govern the next century. Leadership in innovation is not just about wealth, it is about influence over how the future is designed and who benefits from it. The future of innovation is not only technological, but also cultural. It requires a mindset that embraces uncertainty, risk, and change. Nations that encourage experimentation and tolerate failure build ecosystems where breakthroughs can flourish. Those that punish risk or cling to certainty stagnate. America once embodied the spirit, attracting dreamers and risk-takers from across the globe. But when fear of disruption becomes stronger than the hunger for transformation, innovation is misread as danger rather than opportunity. In that moment, decline begins not because others are stronger, but because the willingness to leap into the unknown has disappeared. To misread the future of innovation is to misread the very essence of progress. It is to believe that protecting what once worked will guarantee tomorrow's success, when in reality it ensures obsolescence. The future is already being written in labs, factories, and classrooms around the world. Those who fail to see where the pen is moving are destined to find themselves reading a story they no longer control. The true strength of any nation has never been just its natural resources, its weapons, or its financial power. The real foundation of prosperity lies in its people, their creativity, their education, their drive, and their ability to adapt to change. Cultural and human capital form the invisible currency that determines whether a society flourishes or falls behind. For decades, one of America's greatest advantages was its ability to attract, nurture, and empower diverse talent from every corner of the world. The blend of cultures, ideas, and skills created an unmatched ecosystem of innovation and resilience. But today, that strength is being underestimated and neglected. Instead of investing in people, barriers are rising, divisions are deepening, and opportunities for future generations are shrinking. This is not just a social challenge, It is an economic and strategic mistake that could undermine the very core of competitiveness. Education is the most critical area where this underestimation is clear. The nation cannot lead the future if its schools fail to prepare children for the challenges of tomorrow. For decades, America's universities were the gold standard of the world, attracting the brightest students who would then contribute to its industries and research institutions. Yet cracks are now visible in the system. Public schools in many regions lack funding, leaving millions of students without access to quality education. Teachers are undervalued, resources are outdated, and curriculums are often disconnected from the skills required in the digital economy. While the rest of the world is doubling down on STEM education, coding, data science, and bilingual training, too many American students graduate without the tools needed to compete globally. The failure to invest in education is not just a mistake. It is a slow erosion of the very human capital that built past success. Talent mobility is another dimension where underestimation becomes dangerous. For decades, America was the magnet for global talent, welcoming scientists, entrepreneurs, engineers, and artists who enriched the nation's cultural and economic fabric. The diversity of perspectives led to breakthroughs in technology, medicine, and art that transformed the world. But restrictive visa policies, immigration barriers, and a climate of suspicion are pushing that talent away. Brilliant minds that once saw America as the natural destination are now choosing Europe, Asia, or the Middle East, where opportunities are abundant and governments are actively courting their contributions. Once talent relocates and roots itself in new ecosystems, it rarely returns. The long-term cost is measured not just in lost innovation, but in the decline of influence over the global networks of knowledge and creativity. Cultural capital is equally underestimated. A nation's culture is its soft power, the ability to influence and inspire beyond its borders. America's music, films, technology, and lifestyle once shaped global aspirations. They were not just entertainment or products. They were symbols of possibility, freedom, and innovation. Today, however, that cultural influence is being challenged. Other nations are building their own creative industries, exporting art, cinema, music, and digital platforms that resonate with millions. Instead of strengthening its cultural leadership, America risks complacency, assuming that its influence is permanent. But culture, like technology, evolves. When it is not nurtured, it fades. And when it is underestimated, rivals step in to fill the space. Human capital is also tied to health and well-being. A society that neglects the health of its population cannot sustain productivity or creativity. Rising healthcare costs, limited access, and growing disparities mean that millions of Americans face barriers to basic well-being. Innovation cannot flourish when people are burdened by debt from medical bills or when chronic illness prevents them from contributing fully. Other nations are investing heavily in public health, not only to save lives, but to create a healthier workforce ready to compete in the global economy. The failure to prioritize health as a form of national capital weakens the foundation upon which future prosperity must be built. Another overlooked aspect of cultural and human capital is adaptability. In an era where industries are disrupted at lightning speed, the ability of people to learn, unlearn, and relearn is more valuable than any physical resource. Yet too often, workers are left behind when industries shift. Coal miners, factory workers, and service employees are given little support to transition into new roles. The emphasis is placed on preserving the jobs of the past rather than equipping people for the opportunities of the future. This creates not only economic stagnation, but also social frustration as millions feel excluded from progress. When a nation fails to invest in lifelong learning, it fails to recognize that its greatest renewable resource is the ability of its people to adapt. Diversity is another dimension of human capital, often undervalued. America's strength historically came from the blending of cultures, ideas, and experiences. Innovation thrives when different perspectives collide and create new solutions. Yet, polarization, discrimination, and social fragmentation weaken this advantage. Instead of celebrating diversity as a driver of progress, too many conversations frame it as a challenge to be managed. The danger of underestimating diversity is that it turns a competitive advantage into a liability. Other nations are learning quickly that openness to talent and ideas, regardless of origin, is a key driver of innovation. If America forgets this lesson, it risks losing the very uniqueness that once set it apart. Cultural capital is also embedded in values, resilience, optimism, and the willingness to dream big. These qualities once defined the national spirit and inspired generations to build, create, and take risks. But when inequality rises, when opportunities shrink, and when the younger generation feels trapped by debt and disillusionment, these cultural values weaken. A society that underestimates the importance of maintaining hope and possibility among its people will find that even the most advanced technologies cannot compensate for a lack of belief in the future. Prosperity begins not with machines or markets, but with the mindset of the people who shape them. The underestimation of human and cultural capital also creates vulnerabilities in global competition. Nations that invest in their people, attract global talent, and build strong cultural influence will define the rules of the 21st century. They will not only produce the next breakthroughs, but also shape how those breakthroughs are used, shared, and integrated into daily life. By neglecting its people, America risks not just falling behind technologically, but losing the ability to set the standards that the world follows. Influence in the modern world is no longer about commanding resources. It is about commanding respect, trust, and admiration, all of which flow from cultural and human strength. When human capital is wasted, and when culture is neglected, decline does not arrive suddenly. It unfolds gradually. Innovation slows, trust weakens, influence fades, and opportunities slip away. The danger lies not in losing one battle of technology or one round of economic competition, but in allowing the very foundation of prosperity, its people and its culture, to erode silently over time.